Hi, it's Marianne of MW's Designs. Before I get started, I just wanted to mention I am trying to post new videos every Thursday, and I'm calling it Try It Thursdays, because if you're like me and you're trying to improve your art skills, sometimes you just need to try things and work at it a little bit so that you can improve. Today I am going to be working on my drawing and my watercolor painting skills, and since it is almost officially spring, I have been thinking of things that make me think of spring, and one is crocuses. I live on the prairies, so in the spring, usually sometime in April when it starts to warm up a little bit more, you can walk along in the prairies and you will find these pretty little flowers, and they really can brighten up your day to see them. They're just so delicate and lovely, and the colors are really pretty. So this is a photo that I took of crocuses a few years ago, and I thought I would use that as my reference photo, and if you want to use it, you are welcome to do so. And I start with drawing just kind of generally where the shapes are going to be, just to have a spot where I know they're going to be. And then I start drawing in some of the petals, and they don't have to be really accurate, but just kind of generally, so I know where they're positioned on the flower. And down here, I can't see all of it, but I can see enough of it that I'm able to draw in the end of the petals. I know what they look like. And then over here, there is that little center of the flower, the white, and then the yellow around it. And I just keep going like that, and I actually have completed my drawings, so you don't have to see me doing all of it. So there is kind of a basic outline of the flowers, and then I'm going to be using my graphite paper, and I told you about it before. It has a layer of graphite on one side, and then the back side doesn't have anything on it. So I put my drawing on top of the side that doesn't have anything, and then I use my watercolor paper and set that on there. It's good to clip it down so that it doesn't move on you in the process. And my flower is a little bit more to this side, so I'm just centering it where I want it to be on the actual watercolor paper. Okay, and then I'm just going to use a pencil and trace over all of my lines, and I'm not going too heavily, but I want you to be able to see it, and of course I have to be able to see it a little bit. And just go all around kind of in a logical order so that you don't accidentally miss anything. And if you do have a spot that you don't like when you're tracing over it, of course you can change it, which is kind of a nice feature to be able to do. So there it is, and that's dark enough for you to be able to see it, and of course I would finish it, but in this video. I'm just going to move on to the one that I have already traced. And okay, I don't know, you probably can't see that really well. Maybe I'll just focus it here so you can see a little better. I don't know if you can see that, but it is there. With graphite lines, you can erase it and make it a little bit lighter so that you don't have so much in the background. Now I am going to use my purple. I have put quite a lot of water in here because since it is watercolor painting, you want to have lots of water, and this first layer that I'm going to paint is going to be very light. I'm going to put this back here and hopefully you can, I know what I'll do. I'll move it down a little bit so that you can see it. All right, let's start with this one. So I'm just very lightly painting in the first layer. And hopefully you'll be able to see them a little more now. And if you end up getting a little bit more than you want, what I do is I just use a paper towel or a cloth and I can just get some of the excess off. Okay, and I'm leaving that center part without any paint for the moment. And it will dry very quickly, of course, because it is light. And sometimes when I'm going in with this next layer, I will dab it off so I don't get too much. Now I'm going to look at some of the spots that are a little darker, and I'm just going to add paint in those areas and then tap my brush off and go back and just kind of work with it until it blends a bit so that you can see that part is going to be a little darker, and this one is especially a darker one, so we'll give that a bit more, just a little bit at a time though, and it is a process of layering it up. Okay, maybe these ones now. And again, I bring my brush in and just kind of let it blend a bit. And I'm going to take a little bit of my thicker and darker, and it's darker because it's thicker, and tap that off, and then just go at the bottom with a little bit more of the pigment, and then let that kind of blend. This whole area is darker, so I won't leave any lighter spots in that before this dries too much. Blend it out. I do just a few petals at a time so that I'm not having it dry on me in a way that I don't want it to dry. And this is such a relaxing, enjoyable process. I just love doing it, and I love seeing the way the paint moves and blends, and it is just so much fun. Okay, I'm going to give this a little bit more of the darker. Flowers are a really good subject because they're a very forgiving type of painting. It doesn't have to be perfect because, of course, flowers are all so different, and there can be lots of different shading in flowers. So you can't really paint anything wrong when you're painting flowers, as far as I'm concerned. And what I like about the watercolor too is that you can have such a delicate effect, and it just is really beautiful. Okay, I can't remember if I told you what my paint colors were. This purple is from a Pentel set, and it's simply called Purple. And I think what I did with this, I might have added a little bit of Viridian to it just to make it less of a violet. To me, it seemed quite violet. Okay, let's see, where should I go? Maybe here. And actually, the darker part in this petal is at the bottom, so I'm just going to move most of the paint to the bottom. And you can experiment too. You know, it it really is up to you what you do with it. So lots of options. And I find them, of course, the more time you spend at it, you will improve, and you'll learn what the paper does, what the paint and the water do. So you just have to keep working at it and trying it and see what happens. Okay, maybe this one. This is a pretty light petal. And later on, we'll add some of those lines to define the petals a little more. Okay, and on the outside edge of this one, there's some paint. Okay, and this little folded over part is a tiny bit darker, so I'm going to get just a bit more of the slightly darker paint. I don't want it too dark, but just slightly darker. All right, oh, and I see right there, there's a darker spot, so let's give that a little more there. And just kind of where that line goes up, that you can see. I don't know, but we'll just leave that and see how it looks when it dries. Okay, I'm going to go back here and give that one a little more, especially along the bottom side. Okay. And this spot right here is actually quite a bit darker. So, and of course, you have to think of where the shadows are going to be when you are thinking about where the darker spots are in your reference photo, or if you are fortunate enough to have a real subject to paint from. If it were a little bit warmer outside, I could go outside and do some plein air, I think that's how you say it, plein air painting when you go outside. The trouble with the prairies, though, is we have a lot of wind, and if you're outside in the wind, painting is not very easy or fun. But once in a while, there's a nice calm day that you can get out, and it can be a really lovely experience, really nice. So, okay, well, I'm going to leave some of these just as they are for now. I'm going to smooth that out. And I'm going to show you how I do my little lines. Oh, and I didn't tell you, I was painting that with a number 5 brush, a number 5 round. Okay, and now I have a tiny brush. It's a 5/0, and I don't really know what that means, but it has a very fine, tiny tip. Let's see if I can focus that. Okay, so back here, hopefully that focused again on my actual painting. So I am going to use a little bit of water and dip it in the darker paint, and I really don't want hardly any paint on here at all, so I am just tapping off most of it, and I'm going to go in here and do those very thin lines. Well, I obviously didn't, I got rid of most of my paint there. So we need a little more than that. Okay. And just come from the bottom and go up very carefully. And then you can go back for another little bit of paint. Oop! That's not good. And just keep going along there, and you get the effect. And sometimes I have had it happen that I ended up with too much paint, and so I did go back and I just had a damp cloth. Okay, like just dip my cloth in a little bit of water, and then you can go in here and it will lift it off if you had it too dark. So the thing is to go very carefully and lightly, and then if you have to make an adjustment, it's not a very difficult adjustment. Okay, so that shows that, and let's see. Okay, well, I'd have to paint that a little bit darker, but you get the idea of it. Next, I am going to show you how I did the yellow center. And all I did, let's see, I have cadmium yellow. Okay, you can see it there. And I have a little bit of sap green, and again, lots and lots of water. Tap the brush off, and I wanted to have a little bit of that green in the background, but hardly any at all. So I took my cloth and I dabbed most of it off, and then I'm just going to let that dry a wee bit, and I'm going to tell you what I mixed for my background. I'm actually going to paint around the back, and I used a mixture of some sap green, some of the purple, and I think that was all. Let's just try that and see what happens. So, and the reason I mix it like this, and this is something that I learned from Lindsay Weringer. I'm not saying her name right. Anyway, she's the frugal crafter. And, okay, I need a little bit of green. Anyway, what she says, if you use the colors that you're using in your painting, then you will have a more harmonious effect. It won't be so jarring. Okay, I think my center green is dry, so I'm going to go back there, and I'm going to use my cadmium yellow. And I actually want a fairly thick amount, not too watery. And then I'm just going to tap in the little stamens and leaving that white spot just not colored. And I also used a little bit of yellow ochre, just that little bit darker yellow, just to have a bit of variation in the color. Okay, and then I'm going to use this grayish color that I've mixed up. I think we need a little more pigment here, a little more purple and a little more of the sap green. Okay, so now it's looking quite nice and gray. And then tap that off. And just a little bit of shadow in the center part there. Get rid of some of it so that it's just barely there. That might have been a little too much, but we're going to say it's okay. Then I'm going to show you how I do around the edge. So I like to take lots of water here, and I go all around with the water. So that it's wet. And the thing about putting in a background when you already have your drawing in whatever area you're putting it in, you want to have it wet so that it's a continuous amount of paint, because if you let it dry in between, you're going to have hard edges that you won't like. And I'm going to continue adding water as we go too. So I start kind of from the center and just go out to the edges, and because it's wet in wet, it won't go on to my my previously painted areas, because it will only go into the wet areas. So I go all around and I keep spreading it out, because it's actually going to be a very pale effect. And if there's any darker spots, I move it around. Keep bringing it towards the edge so it's completely covered. Okay, I'm going to add a little more of the plain water, or the lighter water. Now I've got a little bit of the gray mixed into it. I'm actually going to move that out of the way. Okay. And especially if it starts to dry, I'll go back and add more of the clear water. You could use a bigger brush for this too. I just didn't bother going and getting one. And if you have areas that are too dark, just add more water. And move around that gray so that it will blend. And it will. And I like a little bit of texture in it, so I don't want it to be perfectly uniform. And just let it flow. I love the way that flows. It's just so pretty. And okay, I'm going to turn it around and let's go from this side. Okay, more water. Let that head down that way. Get in the little crevice here. When I first did this, it was even more of a mess than it is right now, but I kind of figured out how I needed to do it. And the main thing is to keep all the areas wet and then let the pigment blend, and then you will have fairly smooth but with a little bit of texture. Kind of makes me think of a cloud effect, although not. I just didn't want to paint the background that was actually in the picture because I haven't learned how to be that skillful yet. So we have a cloud around the crocus. Okay. And I think we'll call that done. And I will show you my finished one that I did a little while ago, but let's get rid of that. And when it dried, I thought that the contrast between the background and the crocus wasn't defined enough. So what I ended up doing was using my purple micron pen and did lines around it. And I'm not sure if I entirely like the effect, but it's okay. And see, the background dried quite nicely. Then I could make it into a card, and this is just the card bases from Michael's. I think it's Reflections. I painted around the edge for a border, and then I will use double stick tape and tape it down, and that will be a finished card of a crocus. And although it's not fine art, I think for a card coming from me to a friend, I think my friend would really like it. So that's what I have created today, and I just tried it. So if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button and the bell beside it